Chair lays on House Bill 930 and recognize Chairman Kane to explain the bill.
Thank you, Chairman Cortez. Committee members. Under Article 1, Section 8 of the U.S. Constitution, Congress alone holds the power to declare war. As James Madison wrote in 1793, 3 years after the ratification of the U.S. Constitution, in no part of the Constitution is more wisdom to be found than in the clause which confines the question of war or peace to the legislature and not to the executive department. However, over the years, the federal government has increasingly bypassed this constitutional requirement, deploying our service members, including members of our state's National Guard, into foreign conflicts without a congressional declaration of war. The bill would prohibit the deployment of our state's National Guard troops into active duty combat. That'd colloquially be something where our guards are being shot at, they're doing some shooting. Unless Congress has passed a declaration of war or taken official action pursuant to Article 1, Section 8, Clause 15 of the United States. The Constitution which explicitly calls forth the National Guard for one of 3 enumerated purposes: to execute the laws of the Union, to suppress insurrections, and repel invasions. This bill is not about nullifying federal law. It's about ensuring the federal government follows its own Constitution before sending Texans into harm's way, foreign conflicts. By reasserting this requirement, we are standing up for the rights of our citizens and reinforcing the principles of federalism and the 10th Amendment. This issue is not only a constitutional one, it's actually a bipartisan issue. The Republican Party of Texas has long supported the policy. To quote, it says, "We oppose any offensive foreign military action or any involvement in a war that has not been declared by the United States Congress." And further, it says the Texas National Guard should only be deployed to overseas combat zones under authorization of Congress through a declaration of war. Moreover, 83.88% of Republican primary voters approved Proposition 6, which called for the prohibiting the deployment of Texas National Guard to foreign conflicts unless Congress formally declares war. Similarly, the Texas Democratic Platform provides, and I quote, "Military action should only be used as a last resort and authorized only as allowed by our Constitution." In conclusion, House Bill 930 simply holds the federal government accountable to its own rules and protects the men and women of the Texas National Guard from being sent into undeclared wars. I urge this committee's favorable support of House Bill 930 to help ensure that the Constitution is upheld. Thank you, members. I'm happy to take any questions. Otherwise, we've got plenty of people here. You reserve the right to close.
Yes,
yeah.
sir. Thank you, Chairman Kane. Members, any questions for Chairman Kane? Thank you. We'll begin with your witnesses, sir. Chair calls Amon Blair. Sir, if you could please state your name, who you represent, and your position on the bill. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Amon Blair. I represent the Texas Public Policy Foundation, and I am in support of House Bill 930. Good morning, Chairman Cortez, Vice Chair D'Orazio, and distinguished members of this committee. My support for HB 930 is rooted in 22 years of military service spanning enlisted and officer roles in the Texas Army National Guard as well as the active duty Army. Both as an enlisted soldier and as an officer, I also served as a drill sergeant, an air assault instructor, and an infantry platoon sergeant as well as a platoon leader after 19 years of enlisted service. Texas, with the nation's largest National Guard force, consistently contributes substantial personnel to overseas deployments. Passing HB 930 ensures that deployments occur only constitutionally proper authorization, protecting Texas' rights. President Trump's executive order clarifying the military's roles in protecting the territorial integrity of the United States reinforces the Texas National Guard's operational priority must realign with the armed forces of the United States, and that is to prioritize the protection of the sovereignty and territorial integrity of the United States along our national borders. Texas must defend our homeland first. President Trump's vision of peace through strength aligns explicitly with HB 930, emphasizing military readiness not merely to win battles, but to deter wars altogether, thus ensuring national peace, security, and unity. Quote, "We will measure our success not only by the battles we will win, but also by the wars that we end, and perhaps most importantly, the wars we never get into." Our National Guard must be the strongest, most lethal force in the world by matching threats to capabilities capable of defending both the nation and the states against all enemies. HB 930 resolves this critical issue by reallocating time to enhance the National Guard's lethality and readiness for assigned federal combat missions while prioritizing operational deployments for current homeland defense needs. This is the vision that aligns with Secretary Pete Hegseth. by reestablishing deterrence by defending our homeland on the ground and in the sky through a focus of lethality, meritocracy, and accountability. Passing HB 930 decisively affirms Texas' sovereignty, fulfills constitutional obligations, and significantly enhances national security. This bill ensures our National Guard remains ready, lethal, and constitutionally accountable, prepared for war, yet primarily committed to our homeland's defense. Texas has the duty and the obligation to ensure Texas National Guardsmen are prepared to protect our homeland first, thus preserving peace by clearly demonstrating strength at home. Thank you for your thoughtful consideration of this vital legislation, and I yield for any questions.
Thank you, sir. Members, any questions for this witness? Vice Chair Dreiser.
Yeah, I have a few questions. Okay, can you hear me now? I have a few questions, and I appreciate your testimony. And the first question is, the Director of National Intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard, a combat veteran, endorsed the Defend Guard Act in 2024, calling it a forcing function to make Congress reclaim its War Powers Act. How does HB 930 serve as a similar accountability mechanism for Texas? And why should the state action pressure Congress when it's failed to act nationally?
Yes, sir. As we know that, thank you for this question. This is a really good question, Representative. As we know that the states created the national government, the states created this country, right? True federalism stands that the states are primary, and the sovereignty of the states, the sovereignty of this nation starts at the sovereignty of the states. So by passing this bill, we force the Congress themselves to actually do their duty and obligation. That duty and obligation is to go ahead and declare the war, and then in Article 2, Section 2, by the President, to then, after that war is declared, to then make further decisions as the Commander-in-Chief. So what this does is it states, hey, nation, as a state, we're going to hold you accountable to the Constitution that Representative Briscoe Cain just recently stated.
Thank you. And my next question, I have about 4 or 5. Gabbard highlighted Congress's reluctance to vote on war due to political consequences, like the Iraq War vote. How does HB 930 protect Guardsmen from being sent to wars without clear legislative approval? And what lessons from past deployments should be informed in this decision?
Thank you again for that question. As we all can see, what happened recently in Afghanistan, where countless lives were lost. Our soldiers, airmen, were lost due to negligence. And also, after that, after the long years or long wars in Afghanistan, we gave up that country to the Taliban. And so throughout that entire sacrifice of both our Army Air National Guard as well as our Marine and all active duty components, that country itself was based off of an authorization of use of military force and not a declared war. And because it was not constitutionally sound, we therefore sent our young men and young women to fight in Afghanistan for a country that we just gave up to the Taliban after that.
Okay. Thank you for that answer. Critics, including the National Guard Bureau, argue that HB 930 could lead to the loss of federal funding, equipment, or recognition for the Texas National Guard. How do you respond to these economic threats, and what evidence suggests Texas could mitigate such risks through collective state action or negotiation?
Thank you for that question. So, like I said before in my previous testimony, that readiness is number one. Readiness, training, those dollars that we're talking about are utilized under Title 32 orders. When a National Guard soldier, both Airmen and Army, go to drill on drill weekend, it's Title 32. It's not under Title 10. And so those federal dollars that they're talking about are there to prepare for war themselves, a constitutional war that we should go to. So we are not saying, or I'm not testifying, that we need to abject or go away from those responsibilities of making our force the most lethal force there is. My aim in my testimony is clearly that we must once be the most lethal force, just as Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth stated, by focusing our training dollars that matters most through rigorous collective training. The idea or concept that they're going to pull that away, the money from Title 10 missions is very, very negligible in terms of the money allocated under Title 32 for training dollars. The training is still going to happen. We're still going to go out as an infantry officer and an infantry soldier. I still wanted to go out there, close with the enemy, and destroy and kill the enemy. That's what we train to do every single drill weekend and all of my training. That is not going to cease at all. So we are still under that demand or under that constitutional compact that with the governor as well as with the Constitution and the federal government, that the state itself by Constitution must prepare its men and women to go to wars. All we're saying is those wars must be constitutional. Nothing to do with the lethality of those.
Okay. Okay, the bill preserves the Guard's ability to respond to domestic emergencies and invasions. Can you explain how this ensures Texas remains a vital contributor to national defense while adhering to constitutional limits on overseas combat deployments?
Sure. Right now, there's a really good story. So, overseas deployments. I think it was the Adjutant General that testified on a couple weeks ago that we had, I think 500 personnel that are currently overseas. And we also have current deployments that are scheduled, whether that's going to Kuwait or other deployments overseas, that will be taking personnel from the border mission. Right now, as you stated, as I stated, that President Trump's priority number one is to reallocate all of our resources to defend our territory here and also our homeland defense. That is priority number one, not Kuwait, not Sinai province, not any other wars overseas, but ours first at home. And once those are done, that is met. And that's what Governor Greg Abbott has done successfully with Operation Lone Star, is by directing our Army and Air National Guard now to include 15 other National Guard soldiers to come and support our efforts, both here in Texas and across the southern border, once again, to reprioritize the mission set of protecting homeland first as opposed to someone else's borders.
Okay. Two more questions, and then I'm done. If HB 930 passes, how would it affect the day-to-day operations of the Texas National Guard, particularly regarding training missions versus combat deployments? And what assurances can you provide that it won't disrupt current federal partnerships?
Great question, sir. So, and first and foremost, in the Army, we're in a rearm cycle, or a cycle. We go based off of cycles. So the first is a training cycle, so on and so forth, until we meet the final stage after about a 4 or 5 year cycle process to then go deploy. So in between those 5 years, nothing changes. The only thing that changes is that we're now prioritizing at the end of those 5 years that we go to a constitutional war. Between that time period, we still should be focused to fight, to train with each other to be the most lethal force at all. So in that aspect, nothing is actually going to change. Other than the only change that we are declaring must happen is that at the end of that cycle, when the unit is prepared to go to war and they are certified to go to war, that they go to a constitutional war. But the day-to-day soldier or airman is not going to change whatsoever.
Thank you for that answer. As a veteran, Dan McKnight calls HB 930 ultimate support our troops legislation. How does this bill tangibly support Texas Guardsmen beyond constitutional argument, particularly in terms of mental health, family stability, and civilian job security? And what data backs this up?
That's a good question, sir. So the data itself, I would say with my personal experience, I served as a readiness NCO with under 3 of the 141 Infantry while they were deployed actually to Sinai province. Under that deployment, we are also preached that we would be covered, our soldiers and airmen would be covered under the ESGR benefits, so that way their employers cannot fire them. Unfortunately, that's not the case. That's mostly rhetoric as opposed to actual real-world experience. A lot of those soldiers that came back, they would end up going to their employer, and their employer was like, "Thank you, welcome back, thank you for your service. We've replaced you due to economic hardship," and so then we would go through that ESGR process to try to get their employment back. and it often would never happen. They would claim, the companies themselves would claim that it was economic hardship due to now inflation and everything else like that. So a lot of our soldiers ended up coming home from deployments like the Sinai Province or Kuwait that are not combat deployments and are unconstitutional, come back, no longer have a job. Which also which exacerbates the problem with being away from home. A lot of times, as a soldier, and like as I can only state from personal experience as an infantry soldier, I want to do infantry things. I signed up to be an infantryman. I want to go and close with and destroy the enemy. So when I have to go to a mission that's supporting someone else's border, that is supporting someone else's missions, that doesn't even align with our actual national strategic mission or our national defense mission, but I'm going over there sacrificing my family's time and my time, it puts a mental strain on that. And then if something happens over there, whether my battle buddy themselves die, or something of that, or divorce, now that's going to eat at me, that my decisions to serve the military have only come with massive consequences. All for what? And so when we do come back, when I see soldiers come back through my military career, that's really what's happening. Why did I join? What was the whole reason of joining? We all joined to protect the Constitution of the United States. We didn't join to protect a person. We didn't join to protect the institution as the Army. If you look at the oath of the enlistment and also versus the oath of the officer, you'll see a clear distinction. That oath of the officer is that I signed to protect the Constitution of the United States against both enemies, foreign and domestic. And when we're forced to go overseas and not adhere to that, and not adhere to unconstitutional wars, and then have all these things done to either ourselves, our battle buddies, or our families at home while we are away, it puts a mental strain. Talking about suicides earlier, and that's what we're seeing. We're seeing a high rate of suicides. We're seeing a lot of mental health issues and physical problems both within the family units. So what HB 930 would do, at the end of the day, it would force Congress to do what their job is supposed to do and declare war. It would force the people that brought them into office through our constitutional republic process to actually do their job, so that us as soldiers, us as airmen, such as yourself, sir, before, and those behind me that served, that we can go do what we signed up to do, and that was to defend this Constitution, defend this country, whether that be sacrifice of our lives or not. But to do so, whether it's through a constitutional declaration of war, and that we would also be, at the end of it, that we would finally be able to free our minds and free our hearts, knowing that we are not going over there for some other means or ways, whether that is through someone else's agenda, but to protect the lives and liberties of, first and foremost, our homeland.
Mr. Blair, I appreciate your testimony and answering these questions for you. I have no other questions, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. Representative Isaac?
Hi.
Hi, ma'am.
The Texas Constitution mirrors federal militia clauses, but grants the governor direct authority to call forth the militia for state purposes. So how does this bill strengthen the governor's constitutional role without conflicting with federal authority?
Yes, ma'am, good question. So there was a really good case just recently in 2021. It was Texas versus Department of Defense. It was over the COVID vaccine mandate, where actually Texas defended their position that as the governor, under the Texas Constitution, something that's very different in that in those clauses within Article 4, Section 7 of the Constitution, it clearly gives the governor both the decision to declare whether that's an invasion and to defend the homeland here in Texas, and then to decide after that fact, as opposed to the federal law where it declares that Congress must make that declaration first. And then after that, in Article 2, Section 2, then the president then has that. So the Texas Constitution, first and foremost, allows the Governor Abbott to then make the decisions based off of what he decides as the commander-in-chief, since he is in charge of the National Guard, whether that's on state active duty orders, whether that's on Title 32 orders, or until Title 10 orders, which then the federal government decides. But so long as they are under Title 32 orders, that compact that the governor has with the federal government is that he has been charged with governing and controlling his units inside the state, and that is to include to deter invasions, incursions, and then so and so, and then also supporting only constitutionally mandated wars. And that's how it is. It does not conflict at all. It just goes and tries to force the Congress itself to adhere to those constitutional, the Constitution, whether that is for Congress and also the President of the United States.
Okay. Will you also, and there are some critics to this idea. Will you address what some of the critics are saying about this issue?
Yes, ma'am. I think the question was raised earlier in regards to whether that there's going to be a loss of training, loss of dollars.
Okay.
But I addressed that where all training money actually is in a pot for Title 32. It is not Title 10 pot. Another thing is that they'll get rid of the National Guard. But I doubt that is going to be the case since, one, Texas is the largest military force in the United States. We do more than any other state. I'm not going to say combined, but in this great country of Texas, we do more than anyone else. And they rely so much on Texas that really this bill is going to be an eye-opener for the rest of the states. So this is not just a state bill, state of Texas bill. This similar bill was just passed in the Arizona Senate, 99-0. This bill was, and that's bipartisan, both 99-0 in this Arizona Senate. So this bill is going nationwide, and really what we're trying to do is look. We need an army, and we need an Army and Air National Guard to support that in times of war to defend our homeland. And the idea or concept that by forcing the federal government to adhere to the Constitution is somehow going to make us lose, whether that's Army or Air National Guard or the assets, that is not going to be the case, especially since ever since really the 70s, we've been a total force policy. The Army and both the Army and Air National Guard cannot conduct a majority of their things currently without the Army or Air National Guard. And so by trying to force us or trying to state that we're going to lose these forces, that's somewhat absurd.
Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, Representative Isaac. Any other questions, members, for this witness? Thank you so much for being here today. We appreciate your testimony.
All right, thank y'all.
Chair calls Diego Rivera. Sir, if you could please state your name, your organization, and your position on the bill.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
I'm not as tall as that guy. Let me lower this a little bit. My name's Diego Rivera. I work for an organization called Bring Our Troops Home, and our main project is this Defend the Guard legislation. So I'm here also if you have any questions, but I think excellent job. Well said. But I can talk to you a little bit about what we're seeing and some of the excitement that we're seeing across the country, and especially now that it's being heard in Texas. I can tell you this right now. There is a lot of enthusiasm, and states want to be the ones to lead the charge on this. Places like New Hampshire have passed the House. That's the third largest chamber in the English-speaking world behind Congress and Parliament, and they want to do it. But I'll be realistic. If New Hampshire does it, I could see like 10 states putting it forward. If Texas does it, everybody's going to want to get on board because everybody knows we lead from the front. In our organization, we have thousands. We are first a combat veteran-led organization. We have members all over the political spectrum, and that's the beautiful part is right now in this testimony, there are veterans and enthusiasts all over the country watching this right now. I've never seen more excitement on a bill than this one right here, and that's what I love about it. It isn't partisan because, as Representative Kane mentioned, it's a part of both party platforms. In fact, when it was ballot initiative 6, it got almost 84%. It got more votes in Texas than Donald Trump on the ballot. That's pretty wild. So yeah, that was 1,863,000 votes in the state of Texas. I'd say that's pretty good. It also has endorsements from people like, obviously, as Representative Kane mentioned, Pete Hegseth, Tulsi. Joe Kent is now the director of the National Counterterrorism, as well as local Texans here like Don Huffines. The reason that this bill matters, and I want, is that during the height of the surge, 45% of the occupational forces there were National Guardsmen. They were also 18% of the casualties. So with that, if you have any questions, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rivera, for your testimony. Vice Chair DeRosa.
Oh,
Sir, there's some questions for you.
you're not off the hot seat yet.
Okay. Fair enough.
Opponents cite the Supreme Court decision in Prohibit versus the Department of Defense in 1990 to argue that states cannot restrict federal use of the National Guard. Can you clarify how Prohibit addressed training missions, not combat deployments, and why this distinction supports HB 930's focus on combat-specific oversight for the Texas National Guard?
Yes, sir. So even in the question itself is highly specific on purpose was about training missions. And again, this would fall under Title 32, which there's nothing here. Essentially, the bill is a Title 10 stop before they're federalized to active overseas combat, right? They would get a formal declaration of war. That is when they go into the service, Title 10 under the purview of the president. So what purpose decided was the governor didn't want to send the National Guard to train. And so we're not even addressing that. That stays under Title 32. We make nothing about that. Essentially, still, the bill is on the matters of Title 10. They can be called under the purview of the president for 3 reasons, and that was listed previously with invasions, insurrections, and to uphold the laws of the Union. And we say yes and amen, sir. We just say, if we're going to follow the laws of the Union, I know one that matters, the U.S. Constitution.
Okay. Another question is, opponents in other states like Idaho's Major General Gary Sellier have testified that Defend the Guard legislation could functionally eliminate the National Guard due to federal funding cuts.
Yeah.
How do you reconcile this concern with the fact that the Texas National Guard's dual state federal role has historically been preserved despite constitutional disputes?
Yeah, no, so the conflation you'll see oftentimes is between Title 10 and Title 32. So if we just think of the brackets, Title 10 is under the purview of the president, Title 32 is under the purview of the governor. And so all of these training missions, essentially if you think about it, state readiness is under Title 10. And that's what we want to focus on? Yes, yes and amen. And with Title 10, essentially before they're released into the service of the president, we say Congress should first uphold the law of the Union, declare war, and then send them on the next plane over. And also, essentially, the funding is from Title 32. So the gentleman from TPPF was absolutely right. We are funded for state readiness, not through Title 10. And so if we just think of it in the 2 brackets, then it makes more sense.
Okay, my next question, I'll try to limit my questions. Okay. The War Powers Resolution allows presidential deployments without congressional approval for 60 days. How does HB 930 interact with this federal law, and does it risk creating a constitutional conflict between Texas and the federal government?
So I would have to look up the War Powers Act of 1974, but here's what I could say is that essentially the supremacy, the authority of the U.S. Constitution is what we base it off first, and if anything else finds itself in violation of that, that's when we would say that doesn't really check out. So that's what I would say. I don't have this one from 1903 or 1974, so I don't have that answer, but within 2 minutes I can give you that answer. I just don't have it right now.
Okay. Well, thank you for that. And one other question. If Secretary Hagas supports state oversight of Guard deployments, as he did for New Hampshire, how might Texas collaborate with the Department of Defense under his leadership to implement HB 90 without disrupting federal training or readiness programs?
Yeah, it just simply wouldn't. we're all on board for essentially that part, that bracket, state readiness. We say, again, yes and amen. All we're asking for is accountability, and again, that is simply because when we don't do this, again, the last, some people say the authorization to use of military force is a sort of, Congress abdicates their responsibility, and then there we go. We give it just unilateral executive decision powers, and we're good. The problem is even if you agreed with something like the AUMF, you'd have to think 88% of the body that pushed that AUMF in 2000, 2001 are no longer in Congress. So who's Diego Rivera supposed to hold accountable now that nine out of 10 people that were in Congress on that time are no longer there? So it wouldn't even work. And again, I can't imagine a better endorsement than the guy who runs the Pentagon to be on board with this bill.
Okay. My testimony notes the strain on Guard members from over 1 million overseas deployments since 9/11. How does HB 930 alleviate this burden on Texas Guardsmen, their families, and employers while maintaining their readiness for state emergencies?
Yes, sir. So as the previous gentleman stated, we're all for state readiness, we're all for training, and again, if Congress declares war, we go on the next plane over, simply put. But what we should do is we should ask for accountability, because let's be honest, these boards are being sent to the meat grinder. And so what happens is if Congress is going to put a formal declaration of war, they have to bring this up. What does that mean? They have to debate it. They have to figure out the mission. What does victory look like? When do we come home? The last time we declared war was in 1942. You have to remember this was at the height of World War II, and we wanted to go into Eastern Europe. But guess what? The president still saw fit to go to Congress and say, I need a declaration of war to go to Bulgaria, Hungary, and Romania during the height of World War II. But that's the last time we actually won a war. And since then, we've had no accountability, no congressional oversight, no debate on what we're doing. And again, those boys just essentially get sent to the meat grinder with no accountability.
Mr. Rivera, thank you
Thank you, sir.
for answering these questions.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. Members, any other questions? Thank you so much for being here today, sir.
Thank you.
Chair calls Kevin Hale. Sir, if you could please state your name, who you represent, and your position on the bill.
Thank you, Chairman Cortez, Vice Chair Dorazio, excuse me. My name is Kevin Hale. I given this to you. This was a picture of my 4-foot by 4-foot street signs I used during my congressional race for Congressional District 32. I did this because I want people to understand, in the public who are totally unaware of what's going on in our world right now, what the AUMF is. The authorized use of military force was put in place in 2001, and it keeps getting re-upped every 2 years. And we keep sending kids to wars, and they never stop. We've been doing this for 23, 24 years now. When's it going to stop? When are we actually going to win one of these things? Or when are we going to just stop intervening? That's what we really want. Libertarian Party of Texas supports House Bill 930. Thank you, Representative Kane. I'm not sure if you're aware, but I've already got you a couple of co-authors on board. Representative Richardson and Representative Toth have committed to me that they will be co-authoring this bill. We are in strong support for this bill that it's actually part of our platform. I dropped off letters to your offices last week about that. We want this bill because it restores congressional authority over the war powers, not the president. We want to defend state sovereignty and the role of the Guard. The Texas National Guard exists to serve the people of Texas, responding to state emergencies and supporting local needs. HB 930 ensures that Guard is not misused in foreign conflicts that have not been properly authorized, preserving the Guard's primary purpose and protecting the state's autonomy. We also like this bill because it upholds a non-interventionist values, which is the Libertarian Party position on all wars. We are non-interventionist. HB 30 aligns with that, and it will require legitimate constitutional authority before committing Texas troops to foreign wars. And of course, this will protect service members and families from these unjust wars. The Libertarian Party urges you, please pass this bill, Texas service members are begging you to do this so that we can do these wars the correct way. Let's hold the U.S. Congress accountable so that they produce a declaration of war before sending our children to die. Thank you. That's all I have to say.
Thank you, Mr. Hale. Members, any questions for Mr. Hale?
Yes.
Representative Isaac.
Yes, ma'am.
So do you believe that if Texas does this and other states, that we actually pass legislation to do this, that it will influence Congress to reclaim its war powers?
I sure hope so, because I've been campaigning for 6 years now on ending the AUMF, and this is the first bill that, from a state side, that we can actually put some pressure on Congress to do their job. They have enumerated powers laid out in the Constitution that they've gone and just given up. Like a couple of them, but we're just talking about this one right now, and these wars are unstoppable. We keep going on to the next one. I mean, we stopped in Afghanistan, went to Ukraine, we're pulling out of Ukraine, and now we're going back into Yemen. When's it going to stop? This is a good way for the states to leverage their 10th Amendment and say no more, not without a declaration, a debate, a yes-no vote. We got to hold their feet to the fire because they've ignored the Constitution. And I'm tired of it. I'm tired of campaigning on this.
Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Isaac. Members, any other questions?
Thank you, guys.
Thank you
I
so much for
appreciate it.
being here
Please
today.
pass this bill.
Thank you for being here today. Chair calls Brian Sharp. Ms. Sharp, if you could please state your name, your organization you represent, and your position on the bill. Thank you for being here this morning.
Hi, my name is Brian Sharp. Represent myself, and I support this bill. I'm a West Point graduate, and I was an Army officer in both the regular Army and the National Guard. I support this bill, and if I could briefly say why my wife, Lisa, also supports this bill. So I've been involved with this for some time. I was back here several years ago in support of this bill. I've also testified in Maine, New Hampshire, and Idaho, and in relaying to my wife, Lisa, on those. Usually some folks from the Guard come in after us. And they're good guys. They're also veterans. They also made the same oath that we did to support and defend the Constitution. Oftentimes I'll talk to them before or after testimony, and a lot of them will say they generally support this in principle, but here's what's going to happen to your state. Is the Guard's going to say, you're not dependable to support us, we're going to move our resources to a neighboring state. And I think it was a specific example, I don't remember exactly, I think it was Idaho, and they said, we'll just fly the C-130s to Montana. So these are big Air Force planes. And I relayed that to my wife, and she got mad. She goes, these guys are bullies. They're threatening us, and Texas doesn't like bullies, and she got all fired up. I don't think they're bullies. I think they're just relaying to you as legislators what the potential impact could be on your constituents if something like this passes. And I think that's very true in Idaho. I think it's true in Maine and New Hampshire. They can just fly it across state borders, and you lose the extra income, and it really does matter for a lot of folks in the Guard. I will say, haven't been in the Guard. It's a good way to get away for the weekend, and it's pretty hard for your wife to say, where are you going this weekend? Like, I have Guard duty, as opposed to hunting with your buddies. But it's a very for real thing. The differences here in the state of Texas were so big. If we do it, I think Idaho, Maine, New Hampshire, Virginia, a number of other states will get on board, and I think we can make some substantial change here in the way that we have operate in terms of war and peace. So I really appreciate you guys taking a look at this, and thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sharp. Members, any questions for Mr. Sharp? Thank you so much for being here today, sir.
Thank you.
Chair calls Cody Whitaker. Sir, if you could please state your name, the organization you represent, and your position on the bill.
Yes, good morning, committee,
morning.
Mr. Chair and the chair member of the committee members. Good morning, my name is Cody Whitaker. I am in support of HB 930, and I would like to state as follows. I have a rather unique military career.
Who did you represent, sir?
Pardon me?
Who do you represent?
I actually do, sorry, I am here to represent Republican Liberty Caucus of Texas.
Republican Liberty Caucus.
Right, we're the
of Texas.
constitutional conservatives.
Thank you.
You're welcome. I apologize for that. My name is Cody Whitaker, Staff Sergeant, U.S. Army, retired. I was mobilized in 2004 as an Army reservist in support of Operation Iraqi Freedom. I saw numerous parallel circumstances and consequences of rapid mobilization that both the Reserve and the Guard suffer as a consequence of these rapid mobilizations. Prior to that, I was in the Marine Corps, and I went to Operation Desert Shield and Desert Storm. After my time in the Corps, I went to the Army Reserve and was subsequently mobilized. In those conflicts, as in so many others, Congress disregarded adhering to its Article I powers to declare war. That failure caused all kinds of adverse and deadly consequences for the Guard and Reserve. You may recall there was a Scud missile from Iraq that hit the Army Reserve barracks in Dhahran, Saudi Arabia. They should have been in a hardened building, but we got there so fast, no preparation, just put them up anywhere. In that instance, debate in Congress for a declaration of war would have foreseen sufficient air defense batteries, there were none, and funded the building of hardened shelters for our Guard and Reserve components. But it didn't, and 28 reservists were killed and 110 were needlessly and severely injured in that instance because Congress didn't bother to do their job. This is why declarations of war are essential. It requires debate, consensus, and sober thinking before sending our armed forces off to battle. This is also what makes HB 930, the Defend the Guard Act, crucial to the safety and well-being of Texas National Guardmen. HB 930 would force Congress to examine lessons learned from previous conflicts before declaring war and committing Texas citizen soldiers to hazardous and foreign adventures. Therefore, the Texas legislature should enact HB 930 and defend the Guard. I would be happy to take questions.
Thank you, sir, for being here this morning. Members, any questions for this witness? Representative Isaac.
Thank you, Chairman. Hi, Mr. Whitaker. I think you're one of my constituents from Garden Ridge.
I think I'm pretty close.
Okay.
Yes,
Well, thank you for being here and thank you for your service.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Okay. Any other questions or comments? Okay. Thank you so much, sir, for being here today.
May I add one thing?
Yes, of course.
You know, people thank us for our service all the time, but I would like to say it really is people like y'all that made it worth it.
Oh,
Y'all take care.
it's very kind of you, sir. Thank you. Chair calls Mira Cruz. My apologies if I butchered that a little, ma'am. Please state your name, your organization, who you represent, and your position on the bill.
Yes, absolutely. My name is Mariah Cruz.
Mariah,
I am the president of the National Guard Association of Texas. I'm also an Area 4 director for the Enlisted Association of the National Guard of the United States, so the national component of the National Guard Association of Texas, if you will. And I'm also a currently serving guardsman in the Texas Army National Guard. The position on the bill is against. So thank you, Chairman Cortez, Vice Chair D'Orazio, and members of the committee. The modern National Guard serves as a combat reserve for the United States in accordance with our Constitution. As such, we are funded accordingly. Around 90% of all of our National Guard funding comes from the federal government. If we cease to be that entity for our regular Army component and our regular Air Force component, if we cease to be that entity for them in the sense of a combat reserve, we cease to receive funding accordingly. Families will also suffer from this as well, in reference to benefits that National Guard members have earned as far as it being in conflicts that we've had. As an Afghanistan veteran myself, since that time frame, and we've gone through 9/11, a lot of the associations have done quite a bit of work, both federally to gain parity in benefits and things earned that we benefit from today. A lot of those benefits could be removed. Benefits such as drill pay, GI Bill, retirement pensions, VA home loans, that's just to name a few. We've advocated for quite some time. The National Guard Association of Texas is going into their 66th conference this month, actually in 2 weeks, of advocating parity and equality. If we no longer share that equality, what is the point of giving us the same level of funding? And you can easily move that over to some other federal source and build a reserve component, which they have the reserves as well, but a level of funding can go more towards them in order to build them up and use them in the manner in which they're looking to use them. The Texas Army National Guard and the Texas Air National Guard has not diminished any of their national accommodations along with their state accommodations as well. We are currently doing both at the same time, and albeit we may be stretched a little bit, but we're getting the job done. Pending any questions that you may have.
Thank you, ma'am, for
welcome.
being here this morning. Members, any questions? Vice Chair D'Orazio.
I appreciate your testimony.
Yes.
A question I had, you said funding would be removed. If funding is removed, by what authority would that be done? Who would be responsible for it? And how can it be done since Texas holds 1.6 million retired veterans?
Correct.
And then plus we are the top state for our military funding. I mean, yeah.
We are, sir. So we are the largest National Guard element per se. I think Pennsylvania is probably second to us with about 18,000 serving members or serving guardsmen that they have within their state. Funding, as far as like the intricacies of funding, I am an enlisted member, so I'm not necessarily 100% savvy when it comes to how the funding comes down and so forth. There is the Title 32 that we've discussed from some of the other witnesses that we have here versus the Title 10. But Title 32 funding comes federally as well. And all of that funding comes to train us up to be able to go into combat with them, alongside them, if you will. Equipment purchased for those purposes as well. And so the loss or the reallocation of those funds, if we are no longer going to be of use in that same manner or in that same vein, is a very real threat that could happen within the state. And then the state's then onus would have to be to pay that deficit to maintain a guard that you guys currently have today within the state.
Okay, but you called it a threat. You know, we don't, you know, they threaten us. You know, they got to make good on it.
I got you, sir.
Okay,
Yes, sir.
and so I haven't seen that.
Okay.
You know, we understand the Texas National Guard's a major employer and economic contributor to our state. We understand that. If the Department of Defense were to reduce funding due to HB 930, what strategies could Texas employ to maintain the Guard readiness and economic stability, potentially using state resources?
All right, sir. So I'm trying just to make sure that that I understood your question correctly. It is in basis to our employers and how they're able to assist us in order to be better ready. I'm sorry.
No, how could Texas, if they decided to reduce funding,
Yes.
what strategies could we employ to maintain our Guard readiness so that we can look out for the interests of our state?
Got you. So it would cause an allocation or reallocation of funding, so more funding into our Texas Military Department, if you will, to make up a deficit of any loss of funding that we may be receiving federally. And I believe we're getting a lot of that funding right now in reference to our Operation Lone Star program or Operation Lone Star that we have on the border. So it would be more funding coming from the state in order to fund the Texas Military Department.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. Any other questions? Members, thank you so much,
Thank you for
ma'am,
your
being
time. I
here today.
appreciate it.
We appreciate it. Thank you. Members, we do have a resource witness also here, Andrew Camacho from the Texas Military Department. Mr. Camacho? General? Thank you for being here, General.
Yes, good morning.
Members, so if you have any questions for our resource witness, go ahead, Representative Isaac.
Will you address the funding concern? Can you address it?
I will do my best, and if not, I would happily get back to you. But I can give
General, if you could just state your name,
Yes, thank you, sir.
organization, and position.
For the record, I'm Brigadier General Andrew Camacho. I'm the Deputy Adjutant General for the Deputy Adjutant General Air for the Texas Military Department. Chairman Cortez, Vice Chairman Dorazio, and distinguished members, it's an honor to be in front of you yet again. So I thank you for the opportunity.
As a resource witness?
As a resource witness, thank you, sir, for the clarification. If I could provide one sort of synopsis of equipment and personnel and how we are federally funded, I think it might drive a little bit further in terms of the challenges we would face as a state. So the Texas Military Department, from a personnel perspective, employs roughly 1,400 military technicians full-time, and then 2,100 active Guard Reserve service members. That annually equates to about $536 million that the federal government is providing us for our personnel full-time exclusively. From an equipment perspective, just kind of building on what Ms. Cruz was saying, I will offer that our equipment that we operate, both our Air and Army assets, total $4.3 billion. As a contrast to that, from a state funding perspective, exclusively state funding, state revenue for non-OLS funding that the Texas Military Department has received, we received $119 million for the biennium. So there's quite a significant delta between what the state is allowed or authorizes us every 2 years in comparison to what the federal government provides us annually to operate and maintain, and then maintain our mission readiness. Did that provide, is that sufficient enough in terms of context? I think that was kind of those are some large numbers that I think we fail to understand in terms of what we are authorized on that Title 32 funding side that the governor has given versus how we utilize it within the state.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Vice Chair DeRozio.
Whenever the federal government funds equipment for Texas, and Texas takes possession of all the equipment, $119 million, $200 million, whatever that is, becomes Texas property. Is that correct?
Texas property for operational readiness, but
The
then
operational
also
readiness of our National Guard.
correct. But then, if I may offer an example, so if we use our C-130s that are up in Fort Worth, Texas, they are now currently deployed. They take some of those aircraft, which are federal assets, and they are transitioned over into the deployment cycle. So they are forward, and they are not currently in state to be utilized in the deployment cycle.
Okay, so Texas does not own those assets. Is that correct? Or they're deployed, and whenever they're finished with their mission, do they revert back to Texas?
They do, yes, sir.
Then how could the federal government withhold military equipment from Texas in order to punish us if we pass HB 930?
Sir, unfortunately, that is not an area that's within my realm of expertise to answer, but I can gladly dig into that and provide an answer back.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much.
Yes,
I
sir.
appreciate that.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chairman. Sir, I just quickly, General, if the legislature was to pass this bill by our dear brother, Chairman Briscoe Kane, so that's a nice St. Patty's Day color you have on today, sir. Thank you for acknowledging St. Patrick's Day. But could this, if this bill was to pass, could this somehow impact our service members' benefits that they're entitled to?
Chairman Cortez, thank you for the question. So I would say, in my best military advice, the answer is yes, and I see it directly impacting the big three, as I would like to qualify them, as our education benefits, our healthcare benefits, and as well as our retirement benefits. So if I can just quickly speak
Sure, of
to
course.
specifically the education piece, many of the systems, the GI Bill, post 9/11 GI Bill, as well as our state Hazelwood benefit for education, they all have a federal service requirement tied to them, whether it be 90 days, 180 days. That is a necessary in to receive that benefit. So from an education standpoint alone, which many of us have benefited from, I know my daughter is directly benefiting from my Hazelwood Act currently, I would not, or service members would not have available to them. And then we could
So
go into.
when I was an Air Force reservist at the 433rd, and I was deployed to Kuwait and then we forward deployed into Iraq, I was on duty for over 6 months, and so that allowed me to then qualify for Hazelwood, correct? in
That
the
is
state.
correct.
And so if this was to pass, this might impact that? It would have impacted me, even though I had served in Kuwait and.
It can, sir. So the way I see it is if we are then on the the challenge to our federal mission sets. So if we are no longer deploying and are maintaining readiness for a federal requirement and it becomes exclusively state, we no longer have a tie-in to that federal requirement for being eligible for those benefits, sir.
Understood. Okay. Thank you for answering that question. I know that my colleague, Representative Lopez, who was not able to be here today, he did ask me to ask one question to you, sir. He said, and this is, once again, this is from y'all's previous committee hearings. There was an initial hearing. The Adjutant General mentioned that TMD receives both state and federal dollars to support missions and responses. Could you give us an idea of how much money comes from the state versus the federal government?
So,
That was the
that kind of
question
goes
that
back
Representative
to,
Lopez had.
yes, it's exactly as I was mentioning to Representative Isaac. So if we look at, again, the full-time funding personnel, or for our personnel, that's roughly annually $536 million that we have for our full-time force. And then we add to that the $4.3 billion that we receive in the equipment that Texas owns and operates. That is the example of the annual funding capability that we receive from the federal government to maintain this level of national readiness, national and state.
Understood, sir. Okay. Those were all the questions I had. Members, any other questions for General Camacho? Sir, thank you for being here as a resource witness. If we have any other questions, we'll be sure to ask you to please come
yes.
back up.
Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Chair calls Scott Horton. Mr. Horton, thank you for being here today. If you could please state your name, the organization you represent, and your position on the bill.
Thank you. I appreciate this. My name is Scott Horton. I'm the director of the Libertarian Institute. We're a free market group here in town, and I've written several books about the Middle East wars and as well as the war in Ukraine. I'm not a veteran myself, but I was invited here by my veteran friends to speak on their behalf and in favor of their bill that they've sponsored here.
So you are in favor of the bill?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you.
And so, as I said, I've written several books, especially about the wars in the Middle East, including Afghanistan, Iraq, Libya, Syria, etc. And I think it's basically broad consensus in the country now that we wish we hadn't have done those. The war in Afghanistan changed very quickly from a mission to hunt down and kill Osama bin Laden and the members of al-Qaeda to a regime change against the Taliban government in Kabul and a 20-year nation-building mission which failed. On the vote in 2002 on whether to go to Iraq, the great Congressman Ron Paul issued a declaration of war and said he would vote against it, but he was challenging the other members of the Foreign Affairs Committee to vote for it. And he was told by the chairman of the committee, no, that part of the Constitution is an anachronism. We don't go by that anymore. But of course, the Constitution was never amended to say that Article 1, Section 8, Clause 11 was no longer the law. They just disregarded it. And they launched that war not based on the authority of 535 members of Congress, but based on the authority of one man. And again, is a decision that's widely regarded in America now as a mistake. In 2011, when America went to war in Libya, the gentleman who was the president at that time announced it in a press conference while he was on vacation down in Brazil, not even in a speech to the Congress, and did not even seek an authorization from the Congress to declare that war, which has also been a catastrophe. And so by demanding a declaration of war before the Texas National Guard can be deployed into combat, this bill will go a long way to correcting this problem by forcing Congress into action and saving future American lives. I urge you to vote yes. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Horton, for your testimony. Members, any questions for Mr. Horton? Thank you so much for being here today, sir. We appreciate it. Chair calls Justin Grice, or Grease. Sir, if you can please state your name, pronounce it correctly because I may have butchered it, and who you represent, and your position on the bill.
Appreciate it. Justin Grice, G-R-E-I-S-S. You got it for the record forever. I am in favor of the bill, and I am representing myself as a constituent in District 122.
Who's the representative for that area?
Mr. DeRazio, big fan.
No, you don't say, sir. Wow.
Yes, but glad to be here. I'm also representing, informally, folks who have moved here from other states and came to Texas for the idea of what Texas represents and the TV movie idea of Texas, frankly, that Texas should lead from the front and be bigger and better.
But for the record, sir, you are representing yourself.
I am representing myself, yes. Congress has a 9% approval rating. The American people are clearly tired of the political theater, and this bill is an opportunity to force Congress to do their job. Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution, as you've heard many times today, vests the power to declare war solely in the hands of Congress, the legislative branch. I think it's time to get back to that action. Recently in 2006, during Hurricane Katrina, the Louisiana National Guard was deployed abroad rather than available to respond to the storm and the aftermath of that catastrophe. In Texas, the border crisis, of course, rages on. And I believe the National Guard should remain on Texas soil to represent and support the 31 million Texans across the state. So I'd ask you to join those 84% of voters who were asked on their primary ballot in 2024 if they supported this language in the Republican Party primary and hold Congress accountable. Support this bill. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, for being here today. Vice Chair DeRazio, did you want to say anything to your constituent?
Justin, it's great to see you here today. I appreciate you representing Texas on this bill, and I'll just look forward to talking to you a little bit later on then.
Thanks, sir.
Have a
Appreciate
great
it.
day. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. Any other questions, members, for this witness? Thank you so much, sir, for being here today. Chair calls Elizabeth Miller, and then our final witness will be Mr. Stephen Price. If anyone else wishes to testify on for or against the bill, please ensure that you are registered in the back kiosk. Ms. Miller, thank you so much for being here this morning, and if you could please state your name, who you represent, and your position on the bill.
Good morning.
Good morning.
My name is Elizabeth Miller. I am speaking only for myself today in favor of HB 930. I didn't have necessarily any unique experience, so I'm sorry to take your time, but the people who allow me to be up here at the Capitol to advocate on civil liberties issues are very enthusiastic about this bill. So they implored me to take a moment to thank the chairman for this bill. Thank you so much. I love it. And to encourage all of you to support it. It's not surprising that the people who send me down here would be enthusiastic about it. Many of them are veterans. Well, many Texans are veterans now, frankly. I come from the HD 94. My whole neighborhood is enthusiastic about it. But that's not surprising because you'll find support for it in the Republican party platform, the Democratic Party platform, and the Libertarian Party platform, of which I'm a member, and probably plenty of other platforms that most of us haven't read, you know. So it's broadly popular in other states. Hasn't been done all the way, but you will find enthusiasm, I think, if you talk to your constituents for it. It supports the rule of law, obviously. It says, hey, let's follow the law. It supports the Constitution. It supports our sovereignty, federally, I think, by being supportive of the rule of law, but especially here in Texas. As far as the resistance to it that we've seen, I think most of it is, I mean, it's well-intentioned but misplaced. I think you'll find a lot of, I apologize, I'm also a lawyer. I think you'll find a lot of legal defense to removing funding. And Diego did some great notes on that. I'll leave you my copy if he promises to give me another one. Some great notes on that issue for you guys to look at. So I encourage you to look at that, and I think you'll find that the funding is safe. I would say, you know, how are they going to take on Texas, by the way, on that? Good luck, right? We own that building too, but even if we didn't, I don't think they want that political battle, and we might even enjoy it. If we're all honest.
Thank you, ma'am. If you could hang tight to see if we have any questions from the members. Members, any questions for Ms. Miller? Okay, seeing no questions. Ma'am, thank you for taking time out of your day to come and visit with us. We appreciate your testimony.
We really appreciate your consideration of it.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you very much, ma'am. Final witness, members. Chair calls Stephen Price. Sir, if you could please come up, state your name, who you represent, and your position on the bill.
Good afternoon. My name is Stephen Price, Sergeant United States Army. I'm representing the voices of our veterans, and I'm at present neutral. I wasn't going to testify, but I was sitting in the back, and I hear the back and forth. So with all due respect to our National Guard and our Texas Guard and the Texas military, for what they do in the service to the state of Texas. I think I heard Representative DeRazio's questions. Great questions. I would ask that you inquire deeper into where that money is coming from, and the fact that, yes, well, if we have a disaster here in Texas and our C-130s are deployed, well, what are we going to do right here at home? So, and then I heard the topic of training and the training dollars. So we asking Texas National Guards to do combat training as we would overseas to defend ourselves or our country in Afghanistan? Or are we looking for peace-type, non-combative training that keeps the country in order in the event of an uprising or quote-unquote martial law position here in the country? So war is one thing. War here at home with our own I see the conflict. We're mixing apples and oranges, the Guard versus active duty mission. Okay, so I would venture to say, Mr. DeRazio, again, please be careful what we ask for. We do have a great source of U.S. Army, Marines, Air Force, military that is lacking in recruitment. It seems to me that this may be an effort to fill that void. So please reconsider and have the questions answered, Mr. DeRosario and Mr. Cortez, please.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Members, any questions for Mr. Price before he leaves the hot seat? Thank you, Mr. Price, for making the effort to be here this morning. We appreciate it, sir.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for your service.
Thank you, sir. Is there anyone else who wishes to testify on, for, or against House Bill 930? If not, the chair recognizes Chairman Kane to please close on the bill, sir.
Thank you, Chairman. Members, if I may have a moment, thankfully Representative Hayes isn't here to call a point of order on me for reading from papers, but this is from a December 2024 article published in the American Conservative. You may know in January 2024, the New Hampshire House passed this legislation with a vote of 187 to 182. Following that, one of the panelists then was a nominee, now Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth. He goes on to discuss that, of course, that he's supporting the bill, but I'll get to a quick moment. He says, "I'm sure the National Guard Bureau," and he grumbles. He says, "I love states exerting their intelligence through a system of federalism and the idea of protecting the prerogative of why are we sending some of our young guy from New Hampshire to the eastern province of Afghanistan when you have a northern border problem or floods that happen in New Hampshire and there's no one there to provide support for that." But I'll get down to the main point. This is to quote, "Often state adjutant generals will appear at committee hearings in full dress uniform and instruct legislators not to pass the bill. They'll defend the legal gray area of the U.S. foreign policy and claim, without foundation, that the Department of Defense would rather defund the National Guard and seize all of its assets and bases and equipment than cede authority to Congress." You've heard that today. There is no precedent in U.S. history or U.S. law for a state to lose its National Guard funding due to retaliation over policy disagreements. Congress controls National Guard funding, not the Department of Defense or any part of the executive branch. This is an enumerated power of the U.S. Constitution, and it's buttressed by statutes such as the Impoundment Control Act. So I do ask for your favorable consideration of this bill, not to be distracted by things that have no basis. I think you would find doubtful that the Secretary of Defense of the United States government who supports this bill and others, such as, who's our Tulsi Gabbard, is also pretty important up there, supports it. A slew of other U.S. senators and congressmen believe it's also a good idea. With that, I close.
Thank you, Chairman Kane. Members, any questions for the good chairman? Sir, thank you for bringing us this bill today. We appreciate it. We look forward to working with you on this bill. And members, if there's no other questions for the author, the bill will be left pending. Any objection? Chair hears none. House Bill 930 is left pending. Thank you, Chairman Kane.